Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ekta Sehgal Malhotra, founder, Motherhood Club. We extend a warm welcome to our esteemed guest, Dr. Rita Jarrett, and all our viewers on behalf of Ila Dwivedi, President and Advisor to Motherhood Club, and myself, Ekta, the founder of the group. Today is Autism Pride Day. Now, a lot of you must be wondering, Autism Pride Day, which simply means that children who have autism need a life of dignity, need a life which is inclusive and not exclusive, need to be showered with love and affection as anyone would to any child. And to our mind, we felt that Dr. Rita Jarrett, who is a mother of a special needs child who is 33 years old, she has experience in nurturing him, in growing him up from the time when no one knew what autism is all about. What do I say about Dr. Rita Jarrett? I have known her for a very short while, but I feel that I know a lot about her. She is the first Indian woman to have represented in bodybuilding. And from that journey of participating to being a judge at an international level, indeed speaks volume about her to look at something that we all call as change. Many accolades to her credit. As you can see, it's looking so beautiful. Has won a few pageants also, and does a lot of social work. Has a lot of accolades to her credit. If I talk about all those accolades, perhaps we will spend at least an hour talking about that. But today, we are going to be talking about Rita Jarrett, the mom, a special motherhood journey, a purposeful journey that she has had till now. How did she nurture her child at the time when all she could hear, या तो ठीक हो या sorry to say पागल हो. Let's hear it from Dr. Rita Jarrett, a little about herself and her journey as a mother. So warm welcome, Dr. Jarrett, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on this very special day. There are a lot of parents who are going through this, and I'm very privileged to have an opportunity to express my journey and share with you all. I'm sure that there are a lot of parents who come up to me and they want to know, because what happens is that the parents are very concerned in the initial years and they don't know how to go about it. By the time the child is an adult, most of them who have young children who have just been diagnosed with autism, they don't know how much energy to put into it, how deep do they go into it, because to truly do justice, they might have to sacrifice, everything. Just absolutely, they might have to sacrifice their life. So that's how it started with me. That I actually for 20 years I did nothing except looking after him. So how it started with me, in brief, was that when he was about, say, 7-8 months, when all other children start social interaction, responding to gestures, and even before that, they look into the mother's eye and smile. I never got that sort of response from him, and I sensed that something is not in place. And it was when other children started talking, and he wasn't talking at all. So I took him to the doctor, and this a lot of people got hearing tests done and IQ tests done and all those sort of things, and they just told me to wait and wait and wait because nobody knew about autism. So there was a doctor from US, he saw and he said that it could be autism, and they said the same thing at AIMS, that you'll have to look for the symptoms. But nobody really had, absolute clarity about how to diagnose it. And I wrote to my uncle in USA, and he sent me literature. At that time, we didn't have Google in 1988, 89. We didn't have Google or internet or computers. It wasn't so advanced, and so he sent it to me by post, and I read through it, and I felt that most of the symptoms, they coincided with how he was. And I, I read through Encyclopedia Britannica and very few number of books, because at the time going to libraries was a norm. So it was an absolutely different world, and none of the schools wanted him. So when I got him admission, by hook or by crook, and a lot of push and forcing myself and pushing myself and being the bad one, I actually stayed back in school in the initial years, and I was helping out the school, sort of barter that I would give more than I take and just let him be there. I got a lot of bullying from a lot of parents, and especially the relatives. They would think that there's something wrong in my bringing up, and that's why even after so many years, an entire world has changed. We are in the digital world. People have access to information, knowledge. People are the society is talking about sensitization, but even now, I always talk about the pain that the caretaker goes through, because a mother is always deep inside her heart. We just learn to live gracefully with it, but it's a very, very painful and very sad journey, full of anxiety. And when the same mother is blamed for not bringing up a child properly, besides looking after the children who are autistic, one has to be sensitive to the parents. And when the schools say that this kind of child, having this kind of child in mainstream will jeopardize the career and future of other children, they must consider this kind of child an asset, because having a child like this will give an opportunity to all the children in the class and their parents to get sensitized to a person like that, and look at life from a different perspective since a very young age. So I just feel that there needs to be an entire paradigm change towards how this thing should be perceived.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. We've had a few mothers who have spoken about their special journey, and this was something that came out loud and clear, that every mother, and I would say, why just a mother of a special needs child? Any child who is having different interests or who is differently able, why as a society we are unable to accept them the way they are? As basic as somebody saying that my child doesn't like to study, my
Yeah.
child is more inclined towards art or more inclined towards sports. Perhaps Dr. Jarat, when you and I were growing up, all our parents told us was just study, study, and study. We were never encouraged or motivated for any co-curricular activities. But in today's time, every school is spending so much of time and effort in those non-scholastic and co-curricular activities, right? A lot of
Yes.
you may be wondering, why am I bringing the scholastic and the non-scholastic over here when we are talking about a purposeful journey, a special mother's journey, where we're talking about autism priority. But as Dr. Jared said, it is a change in the mindset to
Yes.
keep on telling the mother, who in any case we would all agree does is made to feel that she does a thankless job. The expression of gratitude is missing, and she does it with unconditional points or parameters. She's giving into it. She makes adjustments. She does a lot of compromises, I must say, a lot of adjustment, gives up her career and a lot more. And not only all these things, but physically, emotionally, mentally, the challenges that she goes through. And to top it all, to tell her that you are not bringing your child properly, and hence the child has these problems. I ask each one of you who's watching us today, or whenever you would watch this conversation, to really think about it. Are we being fair? I
Yes.
know of parents, Dr. Jared, where they have been talking about inclusiveness for children with special needs. Because unfortunately, and whether we accept it or not, we do not sensitize ourselves. Forget about sensitizing our children, who we say are normal children. So, Dr. Jared, when you got to know that your son is being diagnosed with autism, what was your response, and how did you deal with it?
Mine was kind of a very very unconventional story. I think in every sense of the word. Even right after I took to bodybuilding, I've been the most unconventional person. So my mother. I had seen mental illness since a very young age because when I was born, my mother was she had schizophrenia, and throughout my childhood, I had seen mental illness, and probably it was God's will that God was trying to prepare me for this kind of a thing, and I had a lot of desire in me to bring up my children well once I grow up and I get married and I have children. In those days, all girls were told that marriage is your destination, and I was told that I had a dream of having children and I would do how I would bring them up. So a lot of my wishes and desires were, hopes were on this child. So I really broke down initially when, since the first 2 years, I was used to seeing a lot of ridicule and humiliation throughout my life since childhood. I had always been ridiculed. I had always been insulted. I had always been humiliated. And after I got married, being a woman, my in-laws were from a very orthodox family, and then again I went through a lot. So everything was on this child. And when I got to know about him being autistic, after 2 years of getting confused about what's really wrong with this boy, and then it really broke me down. And a lot of people said a lot of things. Some people said that you should probably have a second child. Nothing can be done about him. But I felt that now my life has come to a dead end, and doctors said that you might not speak. It was not a very mild borderline case. It was quite a case, and he might not speak. So even if these children improve, they improve, to some extent, but you might have to spend day and night doing nothing except looking after him, and it may take like decades, like 10, 15, 20 years. And nobody does that. Everybody wants that people go in for a second child and then have a caretaker, or just let the child grow as a human being and maybe initially to make the child literate and then just set him aside. But I said that now I have nothing else to look forward to. So I took it upon myself that even if it's one example in the world, I'm going to look after this child. So, there was no awareness how to give therapy, how to make him speak. So I, studied. I studied myself. I went through books. I made my own properties, flashcards, and I went to a lot of psychologists and counselors. I saw what they were doing, and I made my own techniques, weird techniques. One by one, I taught him words. I got storybooks. I used to. Sometimes there were moments where I didn't realize I was very young, but I used to push him too much. But then, yes, I sent him to a very good school. And, till the time he was in 10th standard, the school was bullying me through and through. But once he appeared in the normal category and they gave his board exams and he got good marks, then people started looking at me with respect, that because the board exam was such that nobody is going to give you marks for free. Nobody is going to say that, there is some partiality or grace marks. Nobody knew the child. So then he did his 12th standard, and then I sent him. I tried to get his graduation and post graduation done here, uh, but the society was very insensitive. College life, they are very, very, those rowdy kind of boys who would bully him. So I sent him to UK, and he did his graduation. He did his post graduation, and finally, of course, he is not employable, but that everything enriched him, and till the end, I have, even now, I face a lot of criticism that I spent everything that I had to make him study in UK. I gave too much for too little. I could have pursued my career, and because I didn't have any career and I was a dependent for 20 years, I got really bullied for my financial needs. And there was another side of me which was very, very sad and lonely. But I was very determined, and it is in the process of teaching him exercises that I fought it out. I had just become a fighter by then, and that's how I started weight training. And even when I was stopped, I said I will take this to the next level, and that's how I started bodybuilding. And that is why I was the first one to do represent India internationally, because before that nobody was doing it. So I think in the process of teaching him, I learned a lot.
Yes, and as they say that our children are our biggest teachers. As much as we think that we are teaching them, on the contrary, they are the ones who teach us. And a lot of people would have heard me say this many a times, that when we mentor our kids, we are in some way or the other mentoring ourselves, because they come up with such amazing questions. They come up with such thoughts, which many a times we know, but we have forgotten about them. So they make us rethink. So they actually activate our mind. And that is what mentoring does to you, where you actually activate your mind. Ela says that she's so proud of you. And indeed, she just stole my words. I mean, really, hats off to you to have struggled from the very first go. You shared that your mom was suffering from schizophrenia, where perhaps your childhood would have been very difficult, right?
Yeah.
And then also so determined you are, in terms of uh, creating something more meaningful for your son, to have educated him. And it's absolutely commendable that he's a post grad, and you have instilled him with good values, and you have made him understand the power of education. And I'm sure there would be a lot that he would be doing in his life ahead.
Yes.
And more than that, besides all these challenges and struggles, you created a name for yourself in an uncharted territory, being the pioneer. Absolutely commendable. Ladies who are listening, who are watching, isn't she absolutely an inspiration? And I don't say this because she's a guest on our platform. When I heard Dr. Jarrett for the first time for perhaps 15-20 minutes, where not so much in detail, but very briefly shared about herself, I was like, I have to speak to her, to know more about her. Because, we tend to get into the habit of saying nothing is right, कुछ अच्छा नहीं होगा, जाने देते हैं. Here is someone who went through that phase, but she said, no, I will do something about it. So not only did she did something for her son, but for herself. So let's talk about that, Dr. Jarrett. When when you started exercising, and you started to teach your son, and you started to do it yourself, and the first time when you were going for the very first competition, Did you leave your son back home? And what was that emotion that you went through as a mother, because you knew that he is solely dependent on you?
Yes, before that, I had already sent him to UK. I was visiting him constantly. It took, I was like, I myself questioned, my own self that what the hell am I doing? Because when I left him alone in UK and I was going to the airport after dropping him, he was running behind my car. And you know that in UK, what is the speed of the cars and how the roads are, that they are unsparingly fast, and it took a lot of courage. But I there are some times in life when you need to take a calculated risk, and I felt that by living alone he will learn a lot, and that will be a very, very great education for him, and he will not be able to have that kind of opportunity safely in India, in the kind of circumstances I was. uh, and there is a structured society. I mean, I love my country, of course. I'll never leave my country, but there are certain things, good things about every country, and so with due respect to all that, they are sensitized more than us as far as mental health is concerned. And there is a kind of structure in the society. Even when they're standing in a queue, you don't need to tell them to do social distancing. It's automatically there on its own. So right from those tiny things to big things, they are more sensitive. So they would call me if there was any issue. But it took a lot of courage for me to leave him alone. So for 4 years, he had already lived on his own, and I was visiting, and in a different country altogether. So I used to visit him and teach him, and make arrangements for him and come back. So I already had the faith that he will be able to manage alone. And when he had to come back from England to India, I was monitoring him all the time. How he would take the flight, and he should lose the passport, and everything. So he's used to living alone, and he has a caretaker. So leaving him alone hasn't been such a problem. And he was already around 17, 18 years old when I started competing. So that was fine. But just that he doesn't like bodybuilding much. He says that, but how we take it is that we accept each other the way we are. So he knows I am different, and and I know he's different. So we are also best friends. So that's how our reaction is towards each other.
Amazing, amazing. That's such a sweet thing to say, that we both are best friends, and wonderful. So how old were you, if I can ask that question, when you actually started to build your career in bodybuilding?
Yeah, I was about 35 or 36 years old.
Okay. So the reason that I asked you your age is, typically when a woman conceives and has a child, and as she progresses in age, you start having issues with your bones because of calcium level going down, and a lot of changes and hormonal changes, and so on and so forth. At 35, you started your extensive fitness regime,
Yeah.
and went ahead to be a pioneer in your field, right?
Yes, I was competing against girls who were just 20 years old, or between 20 and 25.
Right.
So
So
yeah.
so that very first experience, when you actually went into that competition, right, and you had prepared yourself for it, and when you had young girls around you, what was
Yeah.
going on in your mind?
There were a couple of things. First of all, when I competed first, it was in USA. My first competition was in USA, and they respect their fellow contenders. It's not like in India, when there were few girls in the beginning, they were kind of jealous, and they were trying to push each other, and very insecure, because the society is troubling them so much that they try to push each other. But in US, they're very settled, and the society is very evolved. So I was fortunate. They used to tell me, we feel honored to stand second to you. So they made me feel very comfortable. But they were like very, very young, and I never got sponsorship because of my age, because they said we need a young person to sponsor our, anything, gym equipment or supplements. And so I was like kind of doing it on my own. And there were people making fun of me, saying that, I'm trying to do something at an age, and I should be resting and all that sort of thing. But the fact that it didn't trouble me, because I felt that that's how they are, and that's how they are mentally conditioned. But with the thing is, the relationship is with my own self. And how I adjusted to it was that I was fitness conscious from the beginning. I was into some or the other physical activity since the beginning. So I had been good to myself all my life. So that came to my advantage. Secondly, my father was in the Air Force. I saw him training and exercising every day, talk a lot about health and fitness. And I saw how he died, the difference between how he died and my mother died. Because obviously my mother was sick, and she was on the bed and had a very, very sedentary lifestyle. And she died of prolonged kidney disease. And yeah, it was very, very painful. And my father, he was very fit, so he was just working and he just dropped dead. I think for a second also he didn't realize that he was dying. So I felt that first of all, we deserve a good death for one reason, that I don't have a child who will look after me at in my old age. That was one reason I felt that looking after my health and fitness is my sacred duty, because it is me who has to serve my child until the end of my life and prepare for his life after I go, because there is nothing for him after I go. So my health and fitness is of supreme importance. And I think that all parents, it's very important, all parents who have special children, mothers and fathers, they must leave all bad habits, alcohol, smoke. Think that this is a message from God, in this birth, that it is your supreme duty. It's God's call that you have to do this for your child. And because you have a special child, you're a chosen one. So it is very important to look after your health, because if you are going to leave, the world will smash the child. Even if you leave the loads of money for your child, a child who cannot think will not be able to manage that and think for himself. Anybody who is physically challenged has got a lot of provisions from the government. They have a lot of provisions for employment. People are taking credits for everything. No doubt that it's a very difficult challenge. But for mentally challenged people who cannot think for themselves, they have no provision, no safety after their parents or caretakers are gone. So these are the things which help me to really keep up my level of fitness. And I really strive for that. And when I was suffering with COVID, I got myself tested very regularly, not just for COVID positive or negative or something, but also for my lipid profile and the other parameters that affect the longevity. And I was very, very careful, because if something happens, then what happens to the child.
Very true. That's very rightly said by you. And you know, uh, Ela is also a mother of a 28-year-old girl, and she's saying that that should be the main reason to maintain your fitness levels. And you know, a lot of us, especially women, kind of tend to ignore our own health, be it physical, mental, or emotional, and we hide behind this excuse that we are doing this for our family member, we are doing that, and in that whole process, we move from the center point to be shoved in some or the other corner by our own selves. So I think whatever we are hearing from Dr. Jairath as a mother, as a woman, is that when you're doing all of that for your loved ones, you also have to do a lot for your own self. Only then you can make your journey purposeful. and you have to work upon your challenges to overcome them and to see how you can actually look at the brighter side of it. Easier said than done, but yes, if you put in that effort, if you are determined like how she is, I don't think there is anything that is impossible. So, Dr. Jared, or let me not even call you Dr. Jared, let me just call you Rita as a fellow mom. You know,
Yeah.
you made your son study, you educated him, and to my mind, when you educate someone, you have empowered him with the knowledge and the wisdom, right? But before I ask you that question, I'm going to read out a comment that, you know, Ela said that she has a friend who has a 30-year-old child with autism. She cannot travel without her at all. She had to drop her job and career to look after her. Having said this, she has brought her child up as normally as possible. And the child loves to reason and find logic in everything. And what I understand, the more I converse with parents of children who are differently abled or special, they are called that because they actually have a special quality in them. You know, if there is something that God has deprived them of, there is something that He has bestowed them with. So when you were raising him, right, in addition to education, how have you worked upon him or are still working upon him to make him completely independent? Because as we would all accept and internalize that the inevitable of we not being there
Yeah.
will be someday or the other, right? So how are you
Yeah.
making him that independent person that he should be?
First of all, I, I have kind of guided him. I always tell him to exercise. He's learning classical music. Then, I always tell him to use his time constructively. Besides that, I have work, like when I write a lot. I'm a writer. I tell him to. I just keep him, keep giving him some of the or the other work. There are a lot of things he can do. So as I am building my career, he's my personal assistant or manager or whatever whatsoever you may call it, but I keep him engaged. I tell him to do every activity, no matter how long it takes or how difficult it is. I might as well do it myself, but going to the bank or talking to somebody, I always put him on the forefront. So to a large extent, that is the reason why he is quite independent by now. uh, but of course that element of autism and differences does remain. He still he has a baby's heart. He watches TV, and he likes Shaktiman. He likes to dress up like Shaktiman. So I tell him that you do what makes you happy. I never push him that it has to be according to the society, no matter how weird the society finds it. For me, he is important and his happiness is important. So we draw a balance, and I, I'm still trying to set up a business where he gets streamlined income. Uh, I have made him the partner in my company. I tell him to sign the checks, go to people, meet people. I send a driver with him, but I try to make him do as much work of mine as possible. A lot of people think I'm cruel because I'm making him work too much, but right from making tea in the house to doing a lot of things, and he sometimes gets irritated, but I make him do a lot of work. So that it's a process. It's just a process. You cannot do it in one day. That okay, I decide that I'm going to do it. It looks like a humongous marathon job. It looks like too big, unsurmountable. But if you do it bit by bit and take the child along with you wherever you go, make him do everything, have a little patience, then they learn. Eventually. And I keep telling him, you shouldn't be signing anywhere. You should be careful. All those sort of things. So that's how it's a process.
Wonderful. That is indeed, and very well explained the experiential things that you've been doing. Uh, a little bit of a sensitive question, since we are also talking about Autism Pride Day. A lot of us don't understand their world, and that is why perhaps we are insensitive towards them, right? How is their world? How do they see things around them? If you could throw some light on this, because maybe then it will help a lot of us normal people to actually understand their side. Unless we know what that is, unless there is information about it, there is no way that we will understand what they go through, or what is it that they experience, or what is it that they really want us to understand about their world. Because what everybody is trying to do is make them understand our world.
Yes.
Do this, do all these activities and everything. But what is their world?
They will not understand our world. First of all, we need to accept that. If you try to make them accept our world, it will be an endless fight. It will be very, very painful. So this is the one underlying word which can say it all, absolutely all, is acceptance. So as I told you in the last question, that if he says, I want to wear this Shaktiman's dress, or want to do weird things outside, as long as he is not hurting the fabric of the society, I don't care about anybody in the universe except his happiness. And so the one thing which we, and indirectly by example, we are teaching the world acceptance. So that manifests itself not only in accepting autistic child, but accepting everybody who is unconventional. That they teach us, what is the ultimate meaning of accepting an individual the way he or she is, and look at other people as how they are as human beings. So my father, when I used to get upset about him in the beginning, when my father was alive, he used to tell me, don't worry about, you will find a lot of people who are intelligent, who are rich, who are clever, who are talented, but you will having a good, beautiful soul, a good human being in today's world is the rarest commodity. And they are absolutely pure soul, because they don't have any cunningness or kind of manipulativeness in them at all. So what the autistic children have, the typical symptoms are that they have the problem of fixation. They tend to get obsessed. Now what they're getting obsessed with is maybe a video game, or numbers, or something. So if you just let them do it. Now I know children who were good at video games, and they got employed in gaming sites where they needed a child to test the games. So why not? I know people, autistic children, who've been inducted in the army, or for ethical hacking, where you need to you need to decipher a code which is very extensive, and you need to have very good understanding and patience with numbers. So if they're getting obsessed with numbers, because obsession is one main symptoms. So if you train them and you teach them to do something over and over again, they will do it patiently a million and billion times, and they will not get tired like normal human beings. So that's how their world is. They want to be in their little world. They say they don't have emotions, but their emotions are very, very intense. So I feel the underlying thing is acceptance, and once you accept them, they can let them be in harmony with the rest of the world. If they're asking for something in an unconventional way, they don't want to follow the norms or rituals, we should let them be, thinking that, like, if a child doesn't want to follow the ritual of a puja or something, they want to do something silly, we should think they are God's child. They don't need to do all those rituals. God is still watching them. God knows how pure their soul is. So at the end of the day, it's acceptance, and they teach the society to accept everybody, not just the autistic people, but everybody who is unconventional. And this is the Pride Month, so we have an array of unconventional people whom we are kind of acknowledging this month. So I think that autistic children are the epitome of that.
Wonderful. No, I totally salute you for your thoughts, and I really, really wish that mothers like you come in the forefront, share their thought process, share their mind, and guide all of us to work towards the inclusiveness. Because unless and until that happens, there will always be a different world.
Yes.
Theirs and ours, and perhaps if we can blend it, schools can, if they can accept as to how to really guide them, coach them, mentor them, and go beyond the conventional, those math, English, and all those things. If it's music, so be it. If it is sports, so be it. Because like I said, that if something is taken away, there is so much that is given, and that power that is then given to them is so intense that they can actually create magic out of it.
Absolutely. Yes.
Somebody is fabulous in music, somebody is so good in art, and we as normal people cannot even imagine to come close to that finesse that they have, and the talent that they really command. And I'm going to read some comments here. So this is by Anita Mishra. She runs a play school. She said, hats off. I know how difficult task it is to handle with care for special children, because I also have 5 little kids in my school, and I was handling them. Ela is saying kudos to you. um, Anita is again saying for you, you're a strong woman with unconditional love showering. Music, Ela is saying that it helps you to grow, heal overall, and just, reading out some amazing comments for you. We have Rashmi Sanganeria who's not just a mother but a grandmother. That mother should be strong for her child in any in any aspect, and I think you are an epitome. You, as a woman, as a daughter, as a mother, have actually shined in every role that you can play. Otherwise, people who go through so much from the childhood till now, and one after the other, experiencing something like this, perhaps somebody would have just broken down and would not have gotten up from there. But really, hats off to you, and you have that smile on your face. Not many people can do that, and that there is some energy that is there, that I can see in your face. um, Maybe it's the post covid charm, or but that glow is there. And for a lot of you, when I actually first met virtually Dr. Jared, she was still recouping from covid, and even then she had that enthusiasm to to talk about herself, about the journey. And she, I feel, from whatever I have gauged, is actually on a mission to create awareness, knowingly or unknowingly, to let people know that it's okay, accept them, work towards the inclusion of them. Hats off to you, really. I mean, I have goosebumps listening to some part of the conversation. uh, to go through so much in life, and to look at it in your own stride is commendable. Yesterday we had a lady who spoke about courage in communication, that how these two are so important. And you just have depicted that all throughout your life till now. And I'm sure, you will be an inspiration for many and more. Ira is saying that look at the glow and happiness on your face. And she says, I bow down to you for that. But really, we all listen to a lot of stories of inspiration, and we hear them, we process it, and we keep it on the side. But there are very few who really actually create an impact. And I think you are one of those. And I did this for Ruchi, who came in yesterday, who spoke about her journey. She's not a mom, but she spoke about her journey as a woman. And I gave her a standing ovation. And I think you truly, truly deserve this. I'm going to do this for you. And I'm getting cut off the screen. But really, commendable. And I really, would request every mom, every father who's watching us, would watch us, speak your heart out. Tell the world what you feel. Make them aware about the situation. Make them aware about the things. I am sure there is a solution. Don't don't keep it inside you, because that will impact your well-being. And If you have anything to learn from Rita Jarrett, the mom here, is determination, confidence, and to believe that I can be that change. Before I let you go, Dr. Jarrett, sorry, one piece of advice to all the parents who are watching us.
For the parents, is just the main thing is that you have a life and enjoy the presence of life. You have one life, and if you feel sad, if you have a special child, then that child will sense it, and that child is already having his or her own challenges. So let that life be happy and beautiful, and the happiness of that child is everything that should matter. So just you don't bother about the world, and keep your child happy and enjoy the presence of life which God has given to us.
Absolutely. And I think that holds good for each one of us. If we cut the words special, normal, differently abled, etc., 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 just feel that your child is special in any and every way. Accept them. That's a very strong message that has come across in our conversation today. Accept and work towards, making that change. Thank you so much for being with us at the Motherhood Club Talk Show. It's indeed a privilege for Ela and myself to have you on our platform to share your journey and inspire so many of us from that special motherhood, a purposeful journey that you've shared with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I do feel my life as a mission. I've really, when 33 years ago, when for once I had shattered down, I felt that nobody does it, but I will do it. And this is what I wanted, that I spread the message and set an example. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this with you all.
The privilege is totally ours and the pleasure is totally ours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Rita Jarrett. Acceptance, courage, communication, determination to be able to bring about that change was all that she, the mother, spoke about her special motherhood journey. It was full of purpose to work towards educating and empowering her son who is suffering from autism. He is 33 years old, completed his post graduation, working towards making him independent and letting him live his life the way he wishes to. We all need to accept and work towards the inclusion of all special needs children or people. On Autism Pride Day, is there a commitment that each one of us can give to actually give them a life of dignity, of inclusion, and make all of us feel proud of ourselves that yes, we believe in this, and it is not just a day to talk about or to celebrate. They definitely need that encouragement from all of us because we really need to think who is special, who needs to do what is the question that I would like all of you to think about. Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of the Motherhood Club Talk Show. We will be back again with yet another unprecedented conversation on 20th of June at 5 p.m. Father's Day, celebrating in a different manner. Father, a role model, myth or reality. Do join us at 5 o'clock to hear these amazing fathers of different age group, different experience, different thoughts, different mindsets, to hear what they have to say. Because a mother is pretty much vocal about her emotions, her expressions, her thoughts. But fathers have a world of their own, their emotions, their thoughts. could be different, perhaps not expressed, but they definitely feel it. So we will hear what Group Captain Deepak Mago, Mr. Rakesh Pachauri, and Mr. Devi Mishra has to say about Father, a Role Model, Myth or Reality, moderated by myself. And till then, stay safe, take care, and we will meet very soon.